Reddit is a website that has millions upon millions of people tuning in every day. Some of those people have burning questions, some have answers, some have stories, and some have some deep, dark confessions that they feel they need to get off their chest. Sit back, relax, and listen in as we go over those said dark confessions. This is going to be a new series for my channel. If y'all enjoy this content, let me know. It's greatly appreciated. With that being said, let's get into the video. I got in an accident when I was away at college and lost my right eye. I never told my parents, and they still don't know I have a glass eye. It's been 7 years. Back in 2019, when I was a senior in college, I was super drunk at a party and I accidentally shot myself point blank in the eye with a high-powered airsoft gun. I know what you're thinking, and I still don't know how or why I did that. I was blackout drunk and on Xanax. But it happened, and unfortunately the eye was so mangled, they removed it completely. Shortly after, I started shopping around for a glass eye, all while I was still away at school. I didn't tell my family because I didn't want them to know I was on drugs, because I knew how they would react. Luckily, my girlfriend at the time was rich AF, and her millionaire dad, who is also cool AF, agreed to pay for my surgery and my new eye and not tell my family. I thought for sure my parents would notice the glass eye when I came back home, but they didn't. And in their defense, I probably wouldn't have noticed either. It looks so real, it's crazy. I got like the highest quality glass eye that's out there. I mean, this thing is a work of art. And it's not just my parents who don't know. Nobody from my hometown knows. I'm in the process of making the big reveal to them, but I want to do it in a funny way. Any suggestions? Let me know, Reddit. Getting into a couple of commenter suggestions here, we're starting off with this one. It says, make a high-stakes bet that you can keep an eye on something from the other room. Leave a fake eye on the item, walk into the other room. Edit. To keep family together, probably better not to collect on that bet. What you win is the startled look on their faces when they realize your secret. Another commenter says, wait until Halloween to dress up as the pirate that keeps losing his eye from Pirates of the Caribbean. This one I visually pictured in my mind as soon as I read it. I just busted out laughing. I thought this was the funniest one. I let my best friend take the blame for something I did in high school and never corrected it. This has been sitting on my chest for about 11 years now, and I genuinely do not know why I never said anything. Junior year, my best friend Jake and I were both on the swim team. Our coach was strict but fair, and we all genuinely respected him. One night, I thought it would be funny to post a mockingly parody account of him on social media. I made it from a school computer during lunch and forgot to log out of my personal email while doing it. The school traced it back to the computer, but not specifically to me. Jake had used that same computer right before me that day. He was called into the principal's office and questioned. I sat in class knowing exactly what was happening down the hallway and said absolutely nothing. Jake was suspended for a week and removed from the team for the rest of the season. He missed qualifying for regionals, which he had been working toward for 2 years. He never directly accused me, never even seemed to suspect me. He had just accepted it and moved on like the genuinely decent person he was. We drifted apart after graduation. I have looked him up a few times over the years. He seems to be doing fine, but I think about that week constantly, especially when something good happens to me. Like I borrowed something from him that I never gave back, and the debt just keeps growing interest. I do not have a clean ending to this, I just needed to finally say it out loud somewhere. Honestly, in my opinion, it's been 11 years like you said, so he's probably, been on doing bigger and better things. Honestly, if you told him, he'd probably forgive you if he's like a genuinely great person like you said, but then again, you never know. I haven't told anyone this, and I don't know if I ever will, but I need to get it out. Last year, my little brother, quote, he was 19, got into a bad car accident. He was driving drunk after a fight with our dad. He hit a tree, spent 3 months in hospital, lost his right leg below the knee, and doctors said he was lucky to be alive. The thing is, I knew he was drinking that night. He texted me at 1 a.m. saying he was up and needed a ride home. I was tired, had to work early, so I told him to sleep it off at his friend's place or call an Uber. I didn't want to deal with it. He said, okay, whatever, and that was it. He didn't call an Uber. He drove. Now he has a prosthetic can't do half the things he used to love, and every time he looks at me, I feel like he knows it was my fault even though he never said it. Our parents don't know he texted me. They think he just got into the car stupidly. I wake up every day feeling like I killed part of him. I smile and help him with the physio and bring him food, but inside I'm screaming. I don't think I'll ever forgive myself. Sorry for the typos. I'm crying while typing this. I just needed to say it somewhere. Reading further down, a commenter said, "You are not responsible for his accident. I was tired, had to work early, so I told him to sleep it off at his friend's place or call an Uber. You specifically provided him multiple solutions he chose to disregard. His decision to go against your advice and drive drunk is on him, not you. You gave him sound advice. You told him to do the right thing. Remember that, okay?" After that comment, another Redditor says, "It's rough knowing you could have changed things, but his choices are ultimately his own to carry." First Redditor to comment replies saying, "I hate to say it, but even if OP had shown up, that's no guarantee the exact same situation wouldn't have repeated itself another time. Either you take no drunk driving seriously, or you don't. At least in this version, he's still alive / didn't kill anybody." Another Redditor says, "I think this argument is the only one that would make me feel a bit better. If I was in OP's position, it wouldn't matter to my conscience that it was his fault alone. The fact that I could have done something, but I didn't, would be devastating. I live with, quote, not so serious regrets like this, even when I logically made reasonable choices in those moments." Someone else says, "Also, OP was tired. That doesn't mix well with driving, especially at nighttime." And the original commenter says, "That's true. OP could have made a mistake and died, killing one or both of them. Any way you look at this, OP was being the responsible one." And yeah, I'd have to agree with the commenters here. Like, it's not your fault. He made his choices. Y'all are both human beings and you were being responsible. He could have slept at his friend's house or called an Uber, but he didn't. He chose to drive, and that's the consequences of this. And it's unfortunate, these things happen, but that's what happens when you drive inebriated. I was a functioning cocaine addict for a decade. Not a throwaway, no need. From 2008 to 2022, I was a functioning cocaine addict. I went through an 8-ball at least every 2 days and spent thousands of dollars. It was common for me to stay up until 4 or 5 a.m. almost every night, then I'd sleep all day in time for my afternoon shift at work. Other than that, I maintained a rather normal life. Nobody close to me knew anything about this, not my significant other, family, or close friends. The only people who knew were friends who did it with me. In 2022, I moved to a new state for work. I stopped just enough to get clean drug tests and did as much as I could before I moved. I had no source in my new state. I am sure I could have found someone, but I didn't try very hard, mainly out of fear of the new area. My withdrawal symptoms were brutal, and I explained to my significant other that it was just my blood pressure. Eventually, the withdrawal subsided, but my cravings did not. I'd come back home once or twice a year and would always hit up my source for a few $100s worth. Enough to last a few weeks after going back home, but never at the level I was in the past. I moved back to my home area in 2023 and immediately hit up my source. Turns out his number was no longer in service, so I didn't look any further. Today, even 5 years removed from my last usage, whenever I see the drug being used in TV or movies, my brain fires out mass feelings of euphoria and the cravings come back. Thankfully, it doesn't last long, but I always have an intense feeling of anxiety. Moving saved my life from spiraling deeper. I'm not sure if it was divine intervention that saved me from being completely consumed by cocaine, but I am thankful for my current place in life. Another Redditor commented and said, "A functioning addict is just an addict who hasn't crashed yet. You got out before the landing. Respect." Chances of a stranger carrying my offspring, not sure. Not planning to provide dirty details, but just making NSFW to be safe. And that stands for not safe for work, in case you didn't know. To keep a long story short, I met this person off the IG DMs. She blocked me for maybe a month, then unblocked me a few days before Valentine's Day. She ended up spending the night like 3 nights in a row, came over after working, apologized for blocking me, and told me she wouldn't do it again. Afternoon on the 3rd day, I realized she had blocked me at some point. I was also on a bit of an alcoholic bender, and after coming down from it, I'm wondering whether or not she was lying about having an IUD. Not sure if this even qualifies as a confession, but essentially a stranger could possibly be carrying around my offspring, and I have no idea one way or the other. Thoughts, questions, advice? And oh boy, let's get into some comments. Something very similar to this got me sober 22 years ago. I was 3 weeks sober when child was born. I was 4 months sober when DNA test came back as not a match. No contact since. Still sober. Another says, you need to wear condoms. JC, dude, do you not care about STDs? And they just continue to flame him by saying, for real, man's playing life in hardcore mode for no reason. Wrap it up before you end up with way bigger problems. Especially since this was a random woman who actively had a habit of ignoring OP. He's an alcoholic on a bender. No, he doesn't care about STDs. Thoughts, questions, advice? Lol, you're just barebacking it out there. Another says, hold on, you raw dogged a woman you barely know with no tests first? Bro, you're playing with your life. Stop drinking. And another says, off IG too. Bro's cooked. Yeah, I'm gonna keep it a buck with you. Be more careful. Wrap it up, bro. And if you're that down bad, there's free stuff on the internet. What is your family's darkest secret? Was there a deathbed confession? After my grandfather, my mother's side passed away, my mom, her sister, and my 2 uncles pieced together a bit of a family history wherein they came to the conclusion my grandfather murdered a child diddler who was eyeing my aunt, who was the baby of the family at the time, only 6 or 7, on school grounds and trying to get her into his car on multiple occasions. My grandfather drove her to school one day, it was a Friday, and asked her to point out the man who'd been doing this. She did, and that weekend, Grandpa and a close family friend had organized a little getaway for the family up the coast to the beach, which was very random. At a rest stop for gas and snacks, my uncles, 8 and 10 to 11, saw a bundle under their seat in the back, and when they unrolled it, they found a machete covered in viscera. My younger uncle didn't understand what he was seeing, but the older one knew it was some dangerous adult business and wrapped it back up, made him swear not to say anything. They get to the beach late Saturday, and before anyone gets out, Grandpa and the family friend have to, quote, do something first, and they grab a big carpet roll out of the trunk, grab the bundle from under the seat, and carry it up the shoreline, past the rocks and such. A while later, they came back, took the family to a hotel for the night, and spent most of Sunday having fun at the beach. As adults now, my mom and her siblings were shocked, each contributing some small piece to this whole story, never knowing about the whole thing until then. Finally, my grandmother chimed in and said that Grandpa was not a man who trusted the police to do anything about anything and just shrugged. I only really feel comfortable telling this now as both grandparents, my aunt, and my mom have all passed away. Only my uncles are still kicking. Wow, holy crap. If this story is true, you know what? Good on your grandpa and that family friend. Good on them. My dad learned as an adult that his father, who he'd known as his dad his entire life, was not his biological father, but that's not the crazy part. After my grandmother died, my dad asked me to see if I could find anything about his biological father online. Popped a few details into Ancestry and very quickly found a marriage certificate showing a marriage that happened before my grandfather. Then I found another. Then another. My grandmother had been married not once before, but 3 times before she eventually married my grandfather, and she kept them all secret. We don't even think my grandfather knew about the first 2. This was all in the 40s, spanning several states, and we weren't able to find divorce paperwork for all of them, so it's quite possible she was legally married to several people. Holy smokes. Someone commented down below, was this during World War II? It was a known scam for women to be married to several men at the same time to collect their pension and benefits while they were overseas. And the OP says, I'd never heard this before. And yeah, the first 2 marriages were in 1942 and 1943. Might have to do a little more digging to see if I can learn more. My dad used to take me to an old veterans bar when I was a kid. Some of the other members would bring their kids/grandkids as well, and I would play with one of them in particular, because my dad always talked to his mom. One day my dad got pretty hammered there and pulled me to the side. He leaned in and pointed to the kid. He said to me that the other kid was my brother. I asked what he meant, and he seemed to realize he shouldn't have said anything, and he said he just was. This was 20-something odd years ago. I'm pretty sure my mom knows my dad cheated, but not to the extent of having another kid. I also don't think he remembers telling me. I know nothing about that kid and couldn't even recall his name. My parents are also currently the happiest I've ever seen them recently, and I don't want to bring anything up to stop that because they've had some rough years. So for the time being, the only other person that knows is my wife and Reddit. My grandfather was a diddler and diddled his biological daughter, my mother, starting as a young girl. This continued into her marriage to my father and resulted in her using illicit drugs as a coping mechanism. I'm not sure if it was the drugs or if she was just tired of dealing with the demons this caused, but she ended up opting out in front of me at age 4. My grandfather, worried that the OSBI would discover the root cause of her opting out, tried to convince law enforcement that it was not her opting out and that I had murdered my mother. Thankfully, forensic testing confirmed that the cause of death was her opting out. To make matters worse, my 2 younger sisters and I ended up living with him after my father's death. True to form, he began diddling one of my sisters shortly after we had moved in. I did not realize at the time that my grandfather was a diddler and had no idea my sister was being diddled. She told me about it years later and after he had already passed. It was at this point I began looking into our family secrets. I learned that my grandfather had raised another set of grandchildren before us and had diddled one of the girls then too. The entire family apparently knew about the situation and chose not to notify authorities or take any action to help the other children. I suspect they also knew he was diddling my sister for several years while we lived with him. And that's honestly pretty terrible, and I'm sorry you'll have to go through that, and I'm also sorry that you witnessed your mother opting out in front of you. That's even worse. Man, that's just terrible. I stole small amounts of money from my job and never got caught. When I was working a retail job, I figured out that there was a small flaw in how refunds were processed. At first, I noticed it by accident, then one day, I deliberately tested it. It worked. I told myself it was just once. Then I did it again. The amounts were small enough that I convinced myself it didn't matter because it was a big company. I kept justifying it in my head like I wasn't actually stealing. Over a few weeks, I skimmed money here and there. Nothing dramatic, but it adds up. Eventually, management started talking about register shortages and new monitoring policies. I remember sitting there during a staff meeting acting confused while knowing I was a part of the reason it was happening. I never got caught. I ended up quitting not long after because the anxiety was eating at me. Every time a manager walked past me, my stomach dropped. The part I regret most isn't even the money. It's how easily I crossed that line and how comfortable I got lying by omission. My coworkers had to deal with stricter rules because of losses I contributed to. They didn't deserve that. I haven't done anything like that since. I still feel embarrassed when I think about it. It wasn't a mistake, it was a choice, and I'm not proud of it. Another Redditor commented down below saying, I worked at a casino and we had a dealer in the table games area that was discovered to have stolen over $250,000 over a 1-year period. This lady was like a master thief. She went so far as to alter the cuffs on her long sleeve shirt so that there was a pocket on the inside that she could palm and place high-value chips in there. Then she would have friends and or family come in and redeem the chips for cash. She was arrested while dealing blackjack and paraded around almost the entire casino so that everyone possible saw her handcuffed. That day, she had $1,500 in chips in those altered sleeves. It was insane. The crazy thing is, she was really well liked by most of the managers and coworkers. And she was a great dealer, but she got really crazy greedy. If she had done smaller amounts and not so frequently, she probably would have gotten away with it. I saw the surveillance tapes, and it was almost impossible to notice how she swiped the chips. Another Redditor asked, how was she caught? They replied by saying, she picked one wrong person to cash out some of the stolen chips. That person wasn't bright. They walked into the casino and immediately went to the cashier cage to cash out an amount that triggers paperwork, and that transaction revealed that she was a self-reported banned person. She had reported herself at some point for having a gambling problem, which means if you step foot into the casino and you're caught, you get arrested for trespassing. And the transaction was suspicious because she didn't play a single thing and tried to cash out large chips. Well, as you can imagine, she didn't want to be arrested, so she turned her thief friend in to avoid legal issues of her own, which obviously sparked what became a rather large investigation that they had to go back and watch who knows how many hours of footage. I picked a customer's food out of the garbage and packed it to go. So what the title says, I was out for dinner yesterday and the server threw out my meal before I had finished. Quote, had to change a baby diaper and boom, it was cleared. It reminded me of when I was a server. I had literal nightmares about throwing out food that a customer had asked to take home. The restaurant I worked at did not go easy on mistakes. Frequently, I would even have to pay for a meal if I made a mistake. But honestly, just the berating was worse than having to pay. So fast forward to the big day. Someone asked for a quesadilla to be packed up. I autopiloted to the kitchen and threw the food in the garbage. I instantly panicked. I knew both my manager would be pissed to make a new one and the customer would have been annoyed to wait. So yes, garbage was nearly full and I picked up the food, wiped it off, and stuck it in a to-go container. I'm forever sorry, dear customer. And okay, that makes me never want to go to a restaurant or fast food and eat to go or get anything to go again. As a matter of fact, if you're still working in a restaurant or anything at all, please let me know. I'll never go there. I've been getting high off sewer fumes and woke up with my pants off. I'm starting to regret my choices. Anyways, onto the story. So a couple months ago, I, male 48, stumbled upon a Reddit post of a guy whose girlfriend was getting high off sewer fumes. I'm a chronic alcoholic who's been trying to quit, so I was looking for a cheap alternative to getting drunk. And I remembered the post I had stumbled upon months back. I was desperate for a head rush, so I drained all the water in the toilet bowl, and I proceeded to stick my head in the bowl, huffing away at all the fumes, feeling a tingling sensation with each breath. Eventually, I lost feeling in my toes, and standing became a heavy task, so I just accepted my defeat and laid my head in the toilet bowl. I woke up 3 hours later with my pants down, and there was a poorly attempted drawing of Sonic who had his belly inflated, drawn in poop. Not really sure how those got there, but anyway, I'm scared. Is there a chance I caused permanent damage? A Redditor commented, "My God, I hope this isn't real." Yeah, you and me both. Another Redditor says, "Cause permanent damage? Yes, to me, because what in the did I just read?" Another person said, "Jankum is one hell of a drug," and someone commented down below, "Damn, Leroy Jankum over here."
Ready, guys?
Let's do this. Leroy Jenkins!
I used to perform stealth shots at school, and I still regret it. Back in middle school, I was so bored during class that I secretly taught myself to self-diddle without using my hands. I'd wrap my member in toilet paper during break, sit perfectly still at my desk, and used only my pelvic muscles to edge for the entire lesson. No movement, no noise, total silence.
What the?
Eventually, I could finish without anyone noticing. It became my weird little private challenge, training for the perfect incognito Pearl Jam shot. Proudly, I called them stealth shots for myself. Looking back at it, I know it came from a darker place. I was bullied, deeply insecure, and carrying a lot of unresolved baggage. Instead of dealing with my stress in a healthy way, I chose something immature and secretive. I regret it. Pain might explain my behavior, but it does not excuse it. Edit. I can still perform stealth shots, but I prefer using my precious fleshlight. I honestly have no idea what to say. That's pretty gross. And yeah, and to my listeners, I had to see it, so y'all had to hear it. On to the next one. Helped my elderly neighbor move a couch, found his retirement fund from the 1983 Brinks Mat heist. Last week, I helped my 78-year-old neighbor, who I'll call Arthur, move a couch to his new retirement home. While we lifted it, the bottom tore open and gold bars, cash, and what looked like melted down jewelry poured out. Arthur turned pale and immediately confessed. He was one of the crew behind the infamous 1985 Brinkmats robbery, where 26 million euros in gold was stolen. He'd escaped with his share and hid it for 40 years. He showed me clippings of the unresolved case and even had a detailed map of where they buried the rest. He begged me not to turn him in, claiming he's been reformed and just wants to live his last years in peace. But here's the thing. I looked up the case online and authorities are still actively investigating it, with rewards for information. I'm torn. Do I report him and potentially collect a massive reward, or keep quiet and live with the knowledge that I helped a notorious thief move his stolen fortune? My wife thinks we should turn him in. My conscience is screaming at me to. But part of me feels sorry for this old man who just wants to die without spending his final years in prison. What would you do? A Redditor commented, "Ask him if you can get the loot after he passes for keeping his secret safe. I think that's a fair trade." And the OP comments, "I don't want to extort the guy, LOL. Would it classify as that?" I don't want this being my issue. And someone else says, I recommend deleting this thread. I would extort him for some gold and leave him to his retirement. Another commenter says, it's on him for admitting to the crime he committed and also for his negligence letting the treasure be found in such a way to a stranger. At this rate, he will get caught and the reward you'll get is going to be tiny in comparison to even a small gold bar. And someone else says, hell, he's 79 years old. Maybe his memory is not what it used to be. Maybe he forgot the money was there. Maybe he couldn't move it because it was too heavy. Go easy on the guy. And I'd have to agree with the commenters, like, of course, the reward for turning him in is not going to be as big as, say, like, if you weren't to turn him in and you extort him and basically and say, yeah, I won't turn you in if you let me have some of that gold. That's what I'd do, to be honest. I stole money from my parents' saving jar for years as a teenager and never replaced it. When I was between 14 and 18, my parents kept a big jar in their closet for emergency savings. They were working hard to build it up for a house down payment. I started taking small amounts at first, 20 or 50 at a time, to buy video games, go out with friends, or just spend on stupid stuff. It added up to probably a couple $1,000s over those years. They never noticed because they rarely counted it, and eventually they gave up on the house idea, blaming bad luck or expenses. I'm now in my late 20s, have a decent job, and every time I visit them, I feel sick looking at that empty spot where the jar used to be. I know it hurt their dreams, and I took that from them selfishly. I've never told anyone, and I can't bring myself to confess to them directly because it would destroy their trust in me. I regret it more than anything I've ever done, and I wish I could go back and stop myself. Carrying this guilt is eating me alive. A Redditor commented, if I knew as a 15-year-old what I know now, I would have been kinder to my parents. I didn't know then how short a time I would have with them. Put the money back. Nothing is worse than regret. You can still undo some of what you did. I cannot. Someone replied to this saying this, my mom died suddenly when I was 17. I have a lot of regrets about being rude to her and arguing and stuff. You can never be sure. Own up to it and put it right. Another Redditor commented said, this guilt hurt because you know exactly what you took wasn't just the money. It was hope. Regret like this doesn't belong to someone heartless. It belongs to someone who grew up and finally understands the weight of their actions. You can't change the past, but you can still decide who you are now. I understand how the OP feels, I've done quite a bit of things that I regret too, and looking back, I wish I could change, but, past is the past. What's done is done, and it is what it is. You just gotta live with that and just try to do better in the world. Own up to it and put the money back if you can. In 6th grade, I had a friend that lived across the country from me. We Skyped all the time and we were best friends. Well, one night we were on Skype. She was talking about how she didn't want to live, hung up abruptly, and I've never heard from her since. For years, I thought she put on a show so she wouldn't have to talk to me. Another Redditor commented and said, I have a story kind of similar to this. A friend and I were playing Counter-Strike about a year ago, and the team we were placed on was fantastic. Fun guys who could play well. We added them and played a few more games that night until we were getting stomped one game. One of those guys says, I'm about to leave, I don't have time for this. And we were laughing at him and said, no really, I don't have time for this. After some pushing, he tells us that he has some horrible kidney issues and is going to die in about 4 months, as he is low on the list for a replacement. We play with him a few more times in the coming weeks until he gets on less and less to spend time in real life. Anyway, time passes, and the other week I remember the guy and check his Steam profile, last online 8 months ago. Rest in peace, my man. Another commenter says, I got a similar story. In the early 2000s, when Dota was still only a WC3 map, I used to play it pretty competitively even though I was just a kid in grade school. Back then, not many people had good internet connections. Luckily, I did, and was able to host maps for the highest skill players at the time. I specifically remember a Scottish guy who would insta-join my matches as soon as I hosted them. After several months and hours of playing together, we eventually added each other on the friends list of the client. It was called GGC. We ended up playing together for almost 2 years on a daily basis for 6+ hours. He played like 18 hours a day and was always online. We also talked a lot. He was in his mid-30s, living in Scotland, and was a UK Army vet that served in Afghanistan. He occasionally mentioned things like PTSD and depression, but I was definitely too young to fully understand those things. I just cared about Dota. He used to be a very high-energy guy, always joking and spamming the in-game chat, usually trolling the enemy team. But as time went on, he became quieter and quieter. On the last day I ever saw him online, he sent a message along the lines of, Thanks for all the games, mate. I'll be going now. And never ever came online again. A commenter said, at least it sounds like you brought some joy to his world. Your games were probably one of the few times he could stop thinking about all the shit he was going through. Another commenter said, my younger brother in 5th grade had an online girlfriend. He didn't want to break up with her. He wanted her to break up with him. So he Googled, quote, slit wrist, and sent them to her, claiming she made him cut himself. She was devastated and freaking out. He then told her that he was going to off himself and it'd be her fault. A week later, he messaged her and told her that he failed his offing himself attempt because his older brother, quote, me, beat the hell out of him for trying, and then threatened to lock him in the basement, quote, which we don't have. He claimed that he ran away and got arrested for trying to shoplift food, told her it would be the last time they spoke as he could hear the sirens and he was camped out behind a Walmart using the Wi-Fi to tell her he loved her, but he had to break up with her to keep her safe. Then he ghosted her. He's an absolute piece of crap. He still does insane stuff like this. He's so manipulative, he ended up back together with that girl somehow before ghosting her again. Quote, I found out about the whole situation because I walked into his room, which he was on Skype, and caught a glimpse of a picture of slit wrist. He was screen sharing it to his friends, all laughing at what he had done. I grabbed his laptop and went through all his messages. He got all electronics taken away for 6 months, and then he was forbidden from using any sort of online communication for a while afterwards. TLDR, brother is an ass. Someone commented below this saying, more like TLDR, brother is an actual sociopath. Another commenter says, similar scenario. Met a girl through Zune. Quote, judge all you want. We became good friends, started texting and calling often, and then she even came to Texas from Ohio just to visit and hang out. Fast forward about a year, she called me crying. Her home life was terrible, and all she said was, I love you, I'm sorry. I heard a gunshot, her mom banging on what I presume was her bedroom door, and a loud crack of wood, and screams. Her sister reached out to me a few months later to check on me. But that was the last of it all. Only other person I told about this was my belated friend, whom I could not have been more thankful for during my grieving. Not sure why she chose me, or if I would have preferred not knowing it happened, or how. A Redditor commented below that story saying, can't you contact her parents or something to find out, or do you not want to know? And the OP replies saying, I don't even remember her last name. I tried to forget as much as I could. It's still hard to talk about, and if I could find out, I'm not sure if I would want to know. All those stories are actually pretty tragic, and as far as the one about that guy picking on that other girl, sending her pictures of like slit wrists and everything, I hope he gets what's coming to him. But the last and final story of that, wow, it's really sad, and I hope whatever that girl went through, I hope she's doing better now wherever she is, and yeah, it's all tragic. I saw my father cheat on my mother with my now stepmother. My father used to have my now stepmom over to our house a lot when my mother was not home. I walked in on them once when they were, busy. My father always bribed me with candy, money, and even new toys if I didn't say anything to my mom. I never said anything. This went on for about a year. My parents did finally split up. Ironically, it was my father who filed for divorce. He had apparently told my mom he had just met someone else. I never had the heart to tell my mother the truth. For whatever reason, she loved my father. She fought the divorce until she finally gave in and signed the papers. My father and stepmom have since married and had a couple of kids of their own. I don't really speak to either of them. If I could go back and tell some of my friends to deal with their problems, leave me out of it, I would. I've always been the friend that you could come talk to. Relationship issues, anxiety, depressive thoughts, literally anything, they'd come to me. And I do love that my friends trust me enough to talk to me about a lot of these things, but it's too much pressure, and sometimes I want to tell them to shut up and work out their own problems instead of dumping them on someone else. I'm not good at comforting people. I can hardly handle my own emotions, but I do give good advice. And so whenever a friend comes to me, I go into immediate advice mode. And I know people sometimes don't want advice. They just want to feel validated. But a friend got really snarky with me recently after she came to me for help. And after I did help her, she didn't like what she heard. She told me she didn't want a lecture, quote, which I wasn't trying to do, and later apologized for, and that she just goes wherever life takes her. I'm so done with it. I want to handle my issues and my friends to keep it to themselves. Would I be a jerk to tell them to deal with it alone? A couple other commenters said, "You're not a therapist. Boundaries are healthy." And another says, "You wouldn't be a jerk. You'd be setting a boundary to protect yourself. Nothing wrong with that. We all have to find a balance. I'm like you. I tend to get burnt out giving too much of my time and energy away to others. Then need to reset. Good luck and take care of yourself first, because life will suck and you can't help anyone if you don't." When I was a kid, one of the windows in my room led right to the roof of the garage. And since we didn't have any screens, I started climbing out onto the garage roof. Parents found out, added screens. I tried to remove the screens, but I figured I wouldn't know how to put it back on, so I left it alone. Fast forward a few months later, my parents get me a cheapo pocket knife that could do little else but slice through cheap fabric. But it could slice through a screen. So did that, made it look like I still had a screen, and kept going on the roof. Yay. Then we went on a trip. We came back and it was cool summer evening, so Mom goes upstairs to open all the windows. I'm hanging out with the dog at the foot of the stairs when my mom calls my name and asks if I had cut the window screen. Nope. I deny, ready for the "I already knew, I just wanted to see if you could tell me the truth" spiel. Mom frowns, calls my dad to go upstairs with her, and then silence. I figure by now they're planning where to hide my body. A few minutes later, a cop shows up, starts talking to my parents and investigating. I'm called over to talk to the policewoman. She congratulated me for keeping my window locked because obviously some kid was trying to break in to have a house party or a burglar. I'm commended for being safe and smart. Parents are proud. I wish I had gotten caught, but realized if I spoke up now, there would be nothing of me left to identify after my parents got a hold of me. Mom checked the locks on all the windows from then on. Always brought it up. Always said what a smart girl I was for always locking my windows. TLDR, parents thought someone was trying to break in by cutting the window screen in my room. Surprise, it was just their dumbass own kid who knows when to keep their mouth shut. That reminds me of a story whenever I was little. Me and my dad, we lived in this apartment complex, and right there at the center was a laundromat. Well, on the side of the building, there was a red button that if you pressed, it would automatically dial 911 and send a police officer to that location. Well, me being a little kid, I pressed the button. Cop shows up, asks my dad, "Did any of y'all press the button, or did any of y'all call 911, he said. And my father was like, "No." And basically, cop was like that Skyrim meme. Oh, must have been the wind. I don't think either of them noticed the big red button on the other side of the building, but they thought I didn't press it, so never got in trouble. They still don't know. Never told my dad the truth. I killed an elderly man in front of his wife and basically his entire family. Forgive me for any misspellings or format. I'm trying to do this on my phone. I haven't talked about this to anyone, even though it's been years, even my closest friends, minus the ones that were there. One night, when I was in college, I was driving to get some liquor for a party my fraternity was supposed to throw the following night. I was taking a street I was familiar with to get back to my house. It was dark, but the street was lit with street lamps. I remember that I looked at my radio for a second, just a second, not very long at all, but when I looked back up to the road, there was a man crossing. I didn't have any time to react. By the time I saw him, he had already hit the hood of my car and bounced off to the side. I remember screaming and hitting the brakes and watched the horror of what just had happened. I'll admit, I had thought about speeding away, but I pulled over to the side and ran out of my car to check on this guy. When I got to him, his family was standing outside the restaurant he was leaving, and they were all screaming and crying. He was laying on the side of the road with blood coming out of his nose and mouth. 2 other men were standing with him trying to see if he was alright and calling 911. All I could say was, I didn't see him. I was frantic by the time it had set in what I had done. I sat on the curb across from the family and listened to their crying and agony while we waited for the paramedics to arrive. I sat there and sobbed while the paramedics took him away in an ambulance. I don't believe I've ever cried so hard and for so long. The worst part about all of it is what still kills me today was that his wife came over to me while I was distraught on that curb, sat next to me, placed her hand on my shoulder, and said, I was married to him for almost 50 years. We had a good life. Then she hugged me and said that she forgave me. After everything was said and done, it was ruled that it was an accident. I wasn't charged with anything, and I had one of my friends pick me up from the police station. I went down a dark path for years after that. I drank heavily, dropped out of college in my senior year, and had to move back in with my mother and father because I couldn't hold a job. Even tried to off myself with pills. It was a hard road to recovery, quote, which I feel I'm not fully recovered from, nor do I feel I ever will be the same. But eventually, I got my life back in order, joined up with the Navy, and saw a bit of the world. And now I'm on track to go back to college and hopefully finish what I started there. It took almost a decade, but I finally start to feel almost whole again. I'm back to hanging with my friends and actually going out. So maybe there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Wow, you guys are awesome. Thanks for the support and feedback. I've never really posted anything on Reddit before because people can be assholes, but all these kind words are moving. Thank you. And big thanks to whoever reformatted my post. I'm shit at this, so thanks, homie. And that's going to do it for this first episode of Dark Reddit Confessions. If you enjoyed listening and even watching this video, I would appreciate if you drop a like and let me know if you want to see more of this in the future. Alright, have a good one.